Welcome to tutorialsinhand.com. In this video tutorial, we are going to learn how to write a Java program that checks whether the number is even or not. So let's proceed to Eclipse. Now, any number which is completely divisible by 2 is known as even number. That means if you divide that number by 2, it would leave your remainder as 0. We have already seen how to check the remainder of any number in previous video tutorials where we have learned about modulus operator. If you have not seen how modulus operator work, you can visit that tutorial again and you will be able to understand that. For this, we will be using that modulus operator because modulus operator when applied gives the remainder when a number divided by any other number. So let's proceed with using the modulus operator. So for this one, we are not using scanner to take user input. Rather, I am going to use hard-coded values just to save time. You can also accept values from user if you want using the scanner. So for now, let's have a number as 10 and then we are going to check whether this number is even. So how it can be done? It can be done by dividing it by 2 and checking what remainder it leaves. So we can use modulus operator now. If we use modulus operator on it, then we have if condition. That means if condition is something like if this happens, if the condition that I provide within the brackets turns out to be true, then only the code within that if block would get executed. For example, if I say if true, this is hard-coded value that I am passing as true. That means this if will always execute because the condition that I have provided is true. Suppose if I print something over here, suppose I print true. So if you execute this one, then the if block will always get executed. The reason behind that is I have hard-coded the value of if as true. That means the condition within if is always true and that is why the block within if will always get executed. But when we are checking if a number is odd or even, then what we need to do is we will use modulus operator, that is num1 mod operator 2. When num1 divided by 2 leaves remainder as 0, that means if the remainder is equals to 0, then only this block should get executed and it should print even number, right? And more appropriate would be like num1 is even number. This should be much better output. Num1 is even number. So now what is happening over here is when we are dividing num1, that is the value 10 by 2, it should leave remainder as 0. Now you must see the difference between is equals to and is equals, right? Is equals to is something which is used to assign certain value to a variable. For example, here we have assigned value 10 to number variable. So we will use is equals to. But when we have to compare two values, right? Like num1 mod 2 would give something, right? Num1 mod 2 would give 10 mod 2 would give 0, right? Because when you are dividing 10 by 2, it would leave a remainder as 0 because 2 into 5 times would be 10. So we do not have any remainder. So this value would be 0, right? So 0 should be compared to 0. That means 0 is equals to 0, which is true. So it would turn out to be true. This would turn out to be true. This statement would be true and then it would get executed. But if this turns out to be false, for example, if we write num mod 2 is equals to 1 for this one, for this number, that is 10 mod 2 is equals to 1. If we compare, then 10 mod 2 would be 0 because the same reason, like 10 mod 2 would give remainder as 0. So 0 is equals to 1 is not correct. So this would turn out to be false. And when it turns out to be false, this is something which is unreachable code and it becomes irrelevant. And that is why you are seeing here that it is unreachable code, that is dead code, because if this condition is always false, then this block is never going to get executed, right? So it does not have any meaning to write this if block, because this is something which logically would never get executed. So it should be true, then only this is going to get executed, right? So we do not hard code it true and false, rather we write certain conditions, and based on that conditions the evaluation returns the value true or false, which is then decided by if whether it should enter within this block or not, right? So I guess now you have understood how this is working. That means 10 mod 2 would leave certain remainder, and that remainder would be compared if it is 0 or not, and if it is 0 then number is even would be printed, otherwise nothing would be printed and your program would just end without any output. For example, if you want to check, just execute it, and what it is saying is 10 is even number, because when you divide 10 by 2 it would give remainder as 0, and when 0 is compared with 0, that means 0 is equals to 0, which is correct. The whole thing turns out to be true, and if true then this would get executed, right? But suppose if I change the number to 11, then what would happen? Then 11 mod 2 is not equals to 0, because when 2 times 5 is multiplied we get 10, and then 1 would be remainder, and if here 1 is the remainder of this evaluation, then 1 is never equals to 0, right? And if 1 is never equals to 0, this would turn out to be false, and if it is false then this would never enter the loop. And this time we do not get the dead end code as we seen earlier when we hard coded the value false, because it does not know whether num1 mod 2 would be always 0 or not. But if we hard code it false, then we are saying that this is always false. So that is why earlier the code became unreachable, but this time it will evaluate based on this condition and then find out whether it is true or false, and based on that it will judge that this code would get executed or not. And this is the reason this is not a dead code, because there is certain probability of this code getting executed at least certain times in its lifetime. But if we always write false over here, then this code is 100% sure that it will not get executed, because it is always false. So hope you have understood how to check whether a number is even or not. So this is a very simple program, it's very simple logic, but I just took time to explain how the whole thing works and how the if evaluates certain conditions, and based on that how it executes the loop and when it will not execute the loop. So if you now execute this one for 11, then 11 mod 2 equals to 0 is false, and then we are not going to get any result on the console. So let's execute it. See, you will not get anything because it does not enter the if block, because the condition turns out to be false. If you want to print something, you can simply write over here that program ends, so that you get to know whether your code executed or not. Because if it does not print anything, it looks like means what happened is not known to the user, right? So if you write some statement after if, so you can easily understand whether your code executed or not. So this time this will not execute and it will not print that 11 is even. You can write that system.out.println program ends would get executed, and thus you get to know that the number was not even, and thus the program ended. So but here this looks a bit awkward, right? Because if a number is not even, then we should print that the number is odd in this case, or we should print the message that number is not even. And in that case we require if-else statement, which we will learn in the next video tutorial, where we will take care of if-else condition and find out whether a number is even or odd. Thanks for being with us till the end of the video. Please like and subscribe to help us motivate.